So that will be all of you in a few short months, hopefully. So tonight, we're just going to kind of, it's an information session. It's going to be very casual. Ms. Romeo and I are going to go back and forth and talk about, you know, the steps, the nuts and bolts kind of from here moving forward. We've had nights before in the past where kind of an overall view of the expectations, but we're going to talk about kind of the gritty of what each student has to do, the families, what we're responsible for moving forward. So it's going to be casual. Please feel free to ask any questions as we go along, and we'll answer as best we can. We'll have, you know, questions and answers at the end too, but we do want this to kind of be a casual atmosphere. And so tonight we're going to kind of talk about where we are, where we want to be, kind of where we're going, and how we're going to get there. So we thought we'd start off with some fun facts, or maybe not so fun facts, but interesting facts from a year ago. One of the questions we wanted to throw out there is which school in the U.S. had the most applications and how many? So out of this list here, why don't some students say what they thought were the most applications sent into one school?
Number one.
Number one, 92,000. Where do you think that school is? What college do you think received 92,000 applications?
Also number one.
Also, no, this is in the United States. UCLA. So in California, but UCLA received 92,000 applications last year. So which school do you think in Massachusetts had the most applications? UMass, Northeastern, or BU? That would be BU, had the most applications. And they received 55,000 applications last year. So that's just kind of give you a sense of what the applications pool is like moving forward. So as far as what the student has to do, kind of have you done this so far? And I know based on some of the faces I've seen here, some of you have certainly done some of these things, others maybe not yet. If you have not met with either Ms. Romeo or myself, please do so. If you have met us once, please do so again. I think probably we see students maybe 4 or 5 times before they hit the submit button. Our first kind of appointment usually lasts about an hour, I would say. And then from there, they may be quicker appointments, kind of quick questions or a few questions. We're certainly always available, email or quick visits to see us. But please, if you haven't met with us, do that tomorrow when you come to school. Make an appointment to see us. If you have not created a Common App account, that is something you should be doing soon. We will talk a little bit about the Common App. We'll log on tonight and we'll show you a little bit just briefly about some of the important points to do over the next few days. That's something that the Common App takes a while to complete, so starting it sooner as opposed to later is a good idea. Signing up for the SATs or the ACTs, most of you have taken them at least once. We'll show some deadlines on one of the slides. To sign up if you have not done so. Ask your teachers for letters of recommendation. This is another one that you want to do as soon as possible. The sooner you talk to your teachers and ask them for letters of recommendations, the more time they have to put into the letter, and the better the letter will be. So you want to give them plenty of notice. When you choose the teacher that you want to select to do your letter of recommendation, it doesn't necessarily have to be the teacher that you've received the A in the class. As long as it's a teacher that you have a good relationship with, they know your work ethic. So just keep that in mind. We also think about maybe doing a couple different disciplines. So don't ask 2 English teachers, you know, just kind of think about 2 different teachers. You may also want to keep in mind if you're going into a specific program, if you're going into a science program, maybe asking your science teacher as well. And we suggest 2 letters of recommendation, and Ms. Romeo and I will each be doing letters as well. So you'll have a guidance counselor letter and then 2 letters of recommendation typically. So you also need to submit your transcript release forms to us. We'll talk about what those are for the students who have not met with us. They're the bright pink forms that the students will have to send in or hand in to us for every college that they apply to. They need to give this to us. It's your release allowing us to send our letters and the transcript. Without this, we can't meet the deadlines. So we're going to, on one of the slides as well, we're going to give deadlines for the transcript release forms to make sure that they're into us on time so that we meet your deadlines. And then also the parent questionnaire. So we did email out the parent questionnaire a week or so ago. That's really helpful to us. We often get, the snapshot of your student and how they are in school. While they're in these walls, if they're involved in activities, we'll often go to a show, to a sporting event. But it's nice to get a parent's perspective and even examples of your student outside of this building so that we can share that and maybe even share the story in our letters or get a different perspective so we understand your student as best possible before we submit our letters of recommendation. All right. So I know we've talked about fit in the past. If you came to our junior night, we've talked about picking a college that's the right fit for your student. So we're just going to touch briefly on that again tonight. The three areas that you want to look at when you're picking your college, and I know some of you already have a good solid list together, but those of you that are still working on a list, you want to make sure that they fit the academic, the social, and the financial fit for you. If you put the time and effort in now to making sure that these three areas are covered, when you put together your college list, you will have 6, 8, 9 schools that you will happily go to. And that's our goal, that we put together a nice solid list that no matter where you get in, whatever the financial aid award comes out, that you're happy that you're going to attend that school. So doing your homework now is important. If you know what your major is, look into the programs at that college. Make sure, look at some of the courses that they offer. Look at the programming that's there. Make sure that it works for you. Socially, what are your outside interests other than academics? Are you into theater? Are you into sports? And not necessarily being involved in, but enjoy going to those things. Make sure that those clubs that you're involved in here and that you enjoy are also available to you at the college level. It will keep you connected and it will keep you there. And ideally, stay and graduate in 4 years, which is kind of rare these days actually to finish your degree in 4 years. But if you kind of get the fit that's right, and then the financial piece, you'll know more obviously in the spring when you get the financial aid award letters and how that plays into the mix with your family and before you make your final decision. We'll talk a little bit, or actually a lot, about the financial aid piece tonight, how to kind of look on the different websites as far as what sort of need is met and where to go from there. And then balancing your list, you've probably heard us talk about SAFE, Target, and REACH schools and how to balance that to make sure that you have a nice solid list. We've kind of always gone with the safer school or the happily attend school, which is your GPA and your SAT or ACT scores are above what the published scores are. Those scores you can find on College Board. The Target or the Hopeful school is where your GPA and your scores are the 50th percentile of what they publish. And of course the REACH is the schools that are above what your GPA and your Target school and your scores are. So what you want to make sure is when you put together your list, we kind of always think maybe 2 or 3 in each category. I know that's not always the way it works out, so we're a little bit flexible in that as long as you have maybe 3 safe schools, you can apply to all the REACHes in the world. If you're okay with that and the family's okay with that, we just want to make sure as your counselors that you have a few options in the spring. There's always, this is just a visual kind of what I just said. It's a little bit of a different visual as far as the pie chart goes. We would prefer, less reach schools, but certainly that's a family decision. Once again, we just want to have a lot of options for your student. There's so many schools that, like our kids, some of our kids are high GPA, high SAT scores, and you may look at the College Board and see that, oh, that would be a target for me. But I think it's on the next slide, we'll show you the list of schools that are a reach for everybody because they're always a wild card. You have students that are really strong across the country applying to these schools. So it's how do we differentiate from those other students to stand out and make sure that your list is one that you have many options in the spring. Is kind of what we go with. I don't know if you have something to add to that.
The only thing I would add that we've had the conversation with families more frequently the last few years is how many acceptances or denials are you comfortable with? So in other words, however you craft your list, if you have all top tier schools or very competitive schools, best case scenario, you get into them and life is wonderful. But worst case, you don't get into any of them and you might be among the 10% or not among the 10% that are accepted. And are you okay with getting those denial letters? Because we've had students that might receive 8 or 10 in one day. And that's a pretty dark day. So those are conversations that are really important to have. We laugh because our children applied to college the same year and Pam was very certain her son was going to get all acceptances.
He needed the boost. So I made sure that, you know, he applied to schools that he would get into. He wouldn't have handled rejections at that point in his life very well. You know, that was a few years ago. Miss Romeo was more, you know, shot for the stars, a little bit shot for the stars, and it worked out well for her daughter too. But it's a family decision, and how is your student going to react to that?
And so we will often say to a student, are you okay with getting into maybe only 2 schools on your list of 10? Because that is the worst case scenario and a possibility. Or are you need to have far more acceptances, far more choices, which is a very legitimate position as well. So those are conversations that we always have with the students when we look at their list and see kind of where their target, safe, and reach schools sort of fall in their list. So.
And it goes back to also, we want our students to have options. So you want them to have, you know, more than one option. You know, maybe a few options because once again, depending on the family situation, what is the financial piece that comes into play? So, which unfortunately, when you're applying to college, you don't necessarily, you know, we can give a guesstimate, we'll go through some of that tonight, but you don't necessarily know what the financial aid piece will come out like. So, if you have 4 options with 4 financial aid packages, it's kind of a nice discussion to have because you have 4 options. If you only have 2 options and, you know, the financial aid packages may not be ideal, you know, it's just something to think about.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
About what you had said about, you know, your child getting 8 rejection letters in one day. So I'm assuming these letters are emails, and all the colleges have the same drop date?
Well, there's a day, the highly competitive, a lot of the Ivies, top tier schools, release on the same day in the spring.
Okay.
Yeah. Not typically, that's not the norm of all of the schools, but there's a list of, gosh, I want to say 10 schools.
Do all schools do it via email now, or do any actually still send you a letter? I mean, they showed that one kid jumping up and down out by his mailbox, so.
That was probably a little bit longer ago. I think oftentimes they release via either email or you log in. Your student will get a login and they'll say the information will be available on this day, and it's up to you guys to log in on that particular day or the day after or whatever.
Without a camera rolling.
Right. Roll the camera. We'll play everybody else's next year for the seniors.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. Any other questions about that? Feel free to ask as we go along. So just briefly wanted to go over some unique opportunities that are available that in case you didn't know, and there's many, many more outside of what we have listed here, but just to kind of tell you, there's more than just the typical 4-year degree. There is a 5th year free for graduate degree at Sacred Heart, for example. They have a teaching program where if you get enrolled as a freshman into their teaching program and you stay for your 5th year to get your master's in teaching, that 5th year is free. Similar at Clark and Wesleyan for different programs. There's 3-year bachelor programs at the colleges listed there. So, Hartwick, Lesley, Southern New Hampshire. These programs are not easy. They're 3-year programs, but you do 4 years worth of work. We mention these because college expenses continue to rise dramatically each year, and these are just ways you can, take advantage of those pieces to make it maybe a little less expensive, if that's a concern. Some honors programs, like at Muhlenberg, they will, if you get enrolled into their honors program, you get a $4,000 stipend a year. So they will pay you to be a part of their honors program. So co-op programs, which I think probably that's more of a well-known entity within the colleges. But here's a list of some of the colleges that you may not have known that have these co-op programs. So Drexel, Elon, Wentworth, and these are some programs that our kids have applied to and gotten in over the last couple of years. Just to be aware that these are available. And like I said, these are just a few of the many, many available different unique programs out there. And then there's educational co-op programs, for example, like St. Anselm's and Stonehill have a program with Notre Dame, so you would go 3 years at one college and 3 years at Notre Dame. And for example, with St. Anselm's, it's an engineering program, so when you're done, you have 2 bachelor's degrees, one from each college, and it's a 3 and 3, so you spend 3 years at each. So just kind of some ideas to throw out there. So here's the kind of the list. I think we gave this to you in the fall, just thought we would give it back to you again. Schools you can never count on. I don't remember, what did we have? I think 4 out of 31 applicants last year that got into these schools. So 81% of our students from Lenox that applied did not get into those schools, but we did have some kids that got in. Oftentimes, the kids that get in might have a unique experience, or a unique situation rather. So they may have legacy, they may have athletic ability, there may be something that gives them maybe an upper hand, so to speak, at getting into these colleges. All of these colleges have low acceptance rates. I think anywhere from 4 to maybe 16%.
I think what's worth noting is I think every school on the list we've had kids apply to. And truthfully, we haven't had someone get into an Ivy League school from Lenox. I would say 2013 possibly was the last year. Could be close. So point being is we have really qualified students that have every right to apply and are worthy of acceptances, but like the other probably 30,000 applicants don't get accepted. So these, despite your numbers, despite your resume, despite your GPA, it's a school you can never count. Any one of these are just schools you can't count on. The students that have been accepted, it's typically surprising, and it typically has something to do maybe with a hook, like Pam said. We have had some instances where they have been accepted and it's been a complete surprise. Like we actually didn't expect if a kid was accepted. So these are just, put them on your list, throw your hat in the ring, but then kind of put them aside as very much unknown, and also create a list with far more target schools that we feel more confident about. And with any luck, you'll get in. But just to be aware that we often will see students where their list consists of just these schools. And that's pretty unnerving for us, to the point where we've had families actually sign off saying, I understand that this is these schools are highly competitive and acceptance rates are incredibly low, just so that everyone's really clear on sort of the situation that they're in.
And I think outside of the list here, every year, and not to be like Debbie Downers here, but just kind of a reality check for people, because every year there's typically a school that we're surprised by. I know it was a few years ago at this point, but it was Northeastern when everybody was getting into Northeastern. I think it was 2012 when all of a sudden the applications, they're upwards of 50,000 now, 50,000 applicants a year. I think there were over 50 last year. So they're, for, whether they've redone their campus, they've got the great programming, they're a wild card. They're not on this list, but they're still, they're kind of on this list. So every year, it's not like you do A and B and you get C. There's always one year where we find a school that might kind of throw us for a loop. It's not an exact science, I guess is what we're saying.
And actually, Northeastern, we had that happen.
Yes.
Within the last year or two, we had a top student that just was not accepted and others were. So this kid, top GPA, top scores of all the kids from Lennox that applied to Northeastern, and unfortunately for no known reason didn't get in. So these are just things we can absolutely not control or actually predict.
In that particular instance, I actually made a follow-up phone call, and there still was no real solid, we needed a solid answer. I needed one, the student needed one, we still didn't get it. Unfortunately, it makes our job a little bit harder. But once again, it just goes back to a good list. And it's okay, you cross that one off, you have 8 good schools on your list, you're okay. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about understanding the acceptance rates, and Ms. Romeo is going to do that.
Does anyone have questions about any of that? So the reason we actually have a slide that says understanding acceptance rates, the days are gone where it was very simple. You apply, regular decision, maybe early decision, and you get a nice answer, and it was that simple. Those days are very much gone. The acceptance rates and the way you apply are very complicated or very complex and often have strategy involved. So everyone's fairly familiar with the early decision, early action, regular decision. So regular decision generally is due on January 1st. Early decision generally is due around November 1st, November 15th. The difference being early decision, you have to attend that college. I always tell students there's no decision if you apply early decision. If you are accepted, it's a binding, it's a contract that you will attend. Right now, early decision is a very big player in the game, and we'll talk more about why that is. Early action is also November 1st, November 15th. It is not binding. It literally means you apply early and you find out early. So that is an enormous trend that has happened the last 6-7 years. But even those 3 categories have now evolved and morphed into various other categories, like restricted early action, or single choice early action, or ED2, or rolling admissions. So there's this series of categories of how you actually and when you apply to colleges. And it's pretty complicated, and frankly, it's a little frustrating sometimes. But just yesterday I was looking at Yale for a student, and they have single choice early action. And I was like, I think I've heard them all, but I was like, what exactly? I don't even recall what that means. And literally what it means is you can apply rolling. If you apply to Yale single choice early action, it's an early application, November. You can only apply to another state school. You can only apply to a school that has rolling admissions, or you can only apply to an ED2 decision school that gives their decision after January 1st. So I don't know if anyone caught that, but it's just on and on and on. So this is what we deal with. The problem is we can't get away from it because it actually plays a huge role in acceptances. So we have, let's see here. We have kind of this cool chart, and I wish it wasn't just Ivy schools, but we like the chart, so we thought we'd show it anyway. So right now the trend. The trend is if you apply early action, early decision, your odds of acceptance most of the time, not all the time, most of the time is much higher. So if you look at, these are the hardest schools to get into in the country. However, this kind of applies in most cases to most schools. So there's a dramatically higher acceptance rate. So because of this, there's an enormous trend towards moving students to applying early decision when they are on the cusp, when they're applying to top-tier schools, when they're applying to Ivies for sure. The strategy is to apply early action or early decision because your odds are dramatically higher. In addition to your odds being dramatically higher doing early action, early decision, is the colleges are filling upwards of 40+% of that freshman class early decision or early action. The early actions are, again, not something that you have to commit to, but if you're applying to Harvard, you have to do early action. Say you do early action, it's not binding, however, they restrict you. They actually have a restrictive early action, so you can't apply to other private schools. So, point being is, it makes it really hard for students right now to, A, commit at this point in the year Like, okay, I'll apply to Duke, early decision. However, if I get in, I have to go. So that means whatever other schools I might be interested in, whatever other financial packages I might get don't matter. But my odds of getting in are so much higher, it makes perfect sense. So very often you'll hear us say, if you're applying to some of the schools that we just saw on that list, early action, early decision really strategically is the way to go. It's unfortunate, it's really made this process complicated and stressful, but it is an absolute fact that generally speaking, early action, early decision is just more advantageous. Do you want to add to that at all?
I think the only thing you would want to keep in mind is if you're a student who has started to really get that upward swing and you're really in your junior year and your senior year, you're really kicking it off now and your academics are at its best and your GPA is not quite where you want it to be, you may want to hold off and apply after first quarter grades come out because that may boost your GPA. That's kind of a decision, maybe, you know, have your student come in or you call and we can talk more specific about your student. But you want to be careful not to apply early action to a school, or early action more specifically than ED, but to a school that is a reach school for you, whereas after maybe 1 or 2 quarters of grades, your GPA has gone up and you're more in that target type area, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah.
Some schools, so like Harvard has restrictive early action, but that's not that typical. Generally, it's early action and you're not committed to that school.
So you could apply, if you wanted to, you could do one early decision and all the rest early action as long as you made sure that each college is not restricted.
Right,
Correct.
yep, exactly.
Yep.
So you actually have to read all of this. Every college your child's looking at, it's really important to look at that admissions page, look at the different ways to apply, look at the rules attached to them. For example, you might want to do early action, November 1st deadline. However, your child might want to take SATs in November. Most schools will take November tests, not all schools do. So we've had instances where students apply early action, they take November tests, those scores are not considered, kid doesn't get in, no one's happy. So that's really important to go on that admissions page and look at what is the last accepted test date for every deadline, because it makes an enormous difference. And again, that's where you might go regular decision because you want to take November tests, maybe you want to take December tests. So all these pieces play a role in this process, which makes the process really...
It makes it really unique for each student, and a couple of the schools that specifically do not take, so I don't know how many students here are signed up to take the November SATs, but Elon, which is kind of a popular school for our kids to apply to, that's in North Carolina. UMass do not take November scores. There's many more out there, but those are the two that we deal with kind of on a regular basis, so just keep that in mind.
And what's really helpful if you talk with us, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is it like for some schools, like say Ivy's or other schools get into, is it possible that they only offer early decision, not early action?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's true. Every school's different, which makes this process incredibly hard. So the question was just, do some schools only offer early decision and not early action, or vice versa, early action, not early decision? That definitely happens. So that's what I say to families, I think we both do all the time, like if you can help your child with this process, it is immense. It is a huge research project. The details are different at every single school. Like you need spreadsheets, you need good notes, but just for that reason. So generally our kids will have a list of 10 schools, and part of the list will be early action, part will be regular decision, some might be maybe ED 1 or 2. It depends on the school. They all have their own sort of way of doing business. We tend to have a pretty good sense of various schools, at least the ones we see every year. We send out about 400 applications, so we are familiar with a lot of these schools and sort of the things that that goes on there. Like we were just talking about Quinnipiac today. We had a kid applied in January, top of the class. She didn't get in. We called, and they actually told us the later you apply to that school, the less likely, basically the acceptance rate goes down. So there's these weird idiosyncrasies that we just happen to learn along the way that is, if you meet with us and talk with us, we can help once we see your list. So the other piece to this process, which is again making it difficult, is any of the schools, especially the top tier schools, which generally our kids all, not all, but we get a lot of applications for top tier schools. The other piece that we often will say to families is when you look at those acceptance rates on College Board, it gives you the overall average acceptance rate. You really need to break that number down because again, if they have early decision or early action, they may already fill the class upwards of 40%, which means regular decision, that rate of acceptance is actually lower than what they're publishing if you do the math, you know what I mean? And other factors that often people don't think about is say a school is going to accept 2,000 students, your child has to sit back and say, okay, I'm male or female, so that number just got cut in half, because generally it's about a 50-50 acceptance rate for gender. Colleges right now are trying to be very diverse, so it can be upwards of 40% are students of color. Is your child a student of color? Yes or no? That number now is going to be reduced. Low income, very much a push for low income disadvantaged populations. Does your child qualify under that category? Are they first generation? Has the parents of the student graduated from a 4-year college? If not, that makes them first generation. Most schools will accept 14–15% of first generation students. International students tend to be 10%-ish for every school. So the number slowly gets even smaller and smaller. So those are the conversations we often have about, okay, let's look at the acceptance rate. What is that school? What is that freshman class made of? What are they building? Because very often there is very much an agenda that the college is putting together a freshman class that consists of these various things. So we can guess kind of about these categories, but then there's also those categories we have no idea about. What athletes do they need? What musicians do they need? What programs do they need to fill? What faculty maybe have their own children applying? Maybe there's legacy, double legacies that they're applying. Maybe they're huge, they contribute a lot of money to the school. So all those factors are outside of our control, nothing that we actually know to any great degree, but all play a role. Other factors that we talk about, if you are looking at acceptance rates and it says maybe, 30%, but I'm applying to UNC Chapel Hill. Well, maybe in-state the rate is 30%. If you're an out-of-state candidate, that rate goes down to like the rate of Harvard. So a lot of factors will play into what is in-state, out-of-state. Is it a program like nursing or PT where clearly the acceptance rate is not a 30%, it's probably a 10%. But again, you're looking at these average acceptance rates that don't spell out, maybe a student in the arts or a student that's an athlete or a student applying to very competitive programs like engineering, business, computer science. So again, if your child's interested in those fields, it's important to ask the admissions offices, talk to us, what really are those admission statistics and what other pieces does that student need to do to apply? Because generally any of these programs that we've listed, there's other pieces that they must do to apply or to be really seriously considered. If you want to go into PA or PT and you have not shadowed or spent time in an office, you will not be considered at any college. Auditions, if you're going to the arts, if you're music, if you haven't auditioned, you are highly unlikely. It's often required, but you may not even be considered. So those are other additional pieces that affect your acceptance rates. Again, the legacy, athletes, they're just unknown agendas that we have no way of knowing, but all can play a role. So if your child is involved in any of these categories, it's really important you come see us, because generally there's a different process involved. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Reed, in the first one, the program selection, so if you're looking at a general liberal arts college or a college that you don't, is it better to say a discipline if they don't ask and be very general, or is it better to say I want to study basket weaving or whatever? You know what I mean? Like what's the better card? Is it say undecided, or is it to say a specific area?
So what's tricky is it's different at a lot of schools. It is, because some schools you're applying directly into business or directly into nursing. Other schools, well, nursing would sort of be an exception, but other schools you're just applying to the university. You get in, you can choose whatever major you like. So it's really tricky.
But let's use a common denominator to a lot of kids here, maybe UMass, for example. Is it, you have to apply to a certain college in that university, but within that college, would you say a specific discipline at that point?
Well, an example. So a student within the last 2 years applied to UMass, wanted computer science, incredibly competitive, hard to get into. Student applied regular, I don't know, whatever it was, not arts and sciences, but whatever the general major is there, with the hope, I'll just transfer once I get in. A year later, the student is not transferring because it's really hard to transfer internally. So their GPA, they have to get through these calculus or whatever courses, and it's not. You get into these courses generally like if you're qualified, or you know what I mean? So that's like really risky business. If you are trying to, it's one of the things where I would suggest if you are doing something like that at UMass, I would find out what does it take to internally transfer once you're there, because it can be really hard. Or it can be not, it does depend.
Okay, but if you're doing like arts and sciences, it's okay to say discipline if it's just arts and sciences.
Yeah, if that's generally what you're looking at, but it's really tricky. We've had schools that said, oh, we're trying to grow a program. Like, there was one of the really competitive schools a few years ago, and it wasn't engineering for women, but it was something like along those lines. It was sort of a trend, and they wanted to build the program. They actually told us this. And so they were accepting students at a much higher rate for this specific program. So yeah, was that strategically a good idea? For sure. But you want to make sure that genuinely it makes sense. Each school's different. I wish there was a simple answer for all of them, and there isn't.
And I think too, I haven't been on the Common App with a student yet this year, but last year, as far as like specifically talking about UMass, they will oftentimes, depending on the school, ask what your second major would be. So you may not get into your first major, but you would have a second major. And I guess I would say to just go with, throughout this whole process, just go with what the student really wants to do down the road, or what they really are passionate about at the moment. Because if you try to like sneak in kind of through the back door to try to get into the program down the road and it doesn't work out for you, you would have been better off telling all your schools right from the beginning, here's my particular program I want, and then we try to build the list based on the program that the student wants. I don't know if that makes sense, but because depending on the program, once again, it's hard oftentimes to switch a year or two in. So now we're just going to kind of get down to the nitty-gritty of what we're going to do moving forward, what's required for the schools. I think we might have shared this in the fall as well. So all of the colleges that your students are going to apply to require the application and the high school transcript, without a doubt. Most of them require more, but some of them just require that. In addition, the majority of colleges will ask for SAT or ACT scores. There's an application fee associated, of course. The counselor recommendation and evaluation. So Ms. Romeo and I will write letters for our students, and we also do an evaluation form. The letters of recommendations that we've talked about, and the personal essay, the dreaded personal essay, which I'm sure everybody's working diligently on. Some schools, these again are the more competitive schools, will require subject tests, supplemental essays. So within the Common App in particular, once you select your college that you're going to apply to, there may be an additional essay or two, or a question. It may not be a full essay, but questions specific that school wants to know. Interviews. Some schools do require interviews. Other schools highly recommend them. That is something that if you can do, we do kind of recommend that you do that. Ms. Romeo and I do have a list of kind of the most popular interview questions, or how to prepare for an interview. If you are doing that, please let us know. We can meet with you. We can send you that list. We can help you prepare for the interview. The portfolio, that would be like an art portfolio, something like that. And some schools ask for your activities resume. You can upload a resume. There are several free applications out there, believe it or not. So we just listed kind of several schools that our kids have applied to in the last year or two. Because as you apply to colleges, it's like $40, $50. I think UMass is $75 for an application. So if you're applying to 10 colleges, you're talking about several $100s. So maybe if one of these, one of the colleges you're lucky enough to be interested in might actually have a free application. That's just a small list. There's many more. We just kind of highlighted some of the ones that our students have applied to. So the application itself, kind of 3 different categories, all right? So the common application has, I don't know, hundreds of schools throughout the country. We have most of our students apply through the Common App. The Coalition app is new this year for your students. Your students seem to have everything that's new. You guys have the new SATs. You guys have the new Coalition app. You guys also have a new FAFSA coming up. So the Coalition app, we're just going to talk briefly about. That's brand new this year. And then, of course, there's none of the above, which is colleges that have their own application, neither Common App or the Coalition app, that you apply directly through the college's website. To go on to the Common App. So I guess, so here we kind of want to just get a sense of where students are at. Now I know as far as my students that I've seen out there, I was thinking of maybe going on to the Common App and just highlighting a couple of things that I want to make sure you guys have done. Does everybody here at least have a Common App account? Maybe? Okay. Maybe we just go on. And so I did a fake student, so we'll just go on with the fake student and just show you a couple of the things that I'd like you to maybe focus on this week, if you haven't done so already. So on this slide here, if you haven't, before you sign in, if you don't have an account yet, this is, no, that's fine. The website is on the handout. You want to click on where it says create an account if you haven't done so already. Like I said, I did create an account, so we're not going to do that right now. That's very simple. It's basically name, address, email address. And once you create an account, that's what I'll show you now, kind of the tabs that you're going to be working on. So it's sorry, these fake students. So I'm just going to kind of fairly briefly go over the tabs here. So yeah, so that's all right, I can. So here's kind of the base, the bulk of your students' Common App, okay? So you'll see on the left-hand side all the different selections. So there's the profile, the family, and so on. I went ahead and I filled out the education piece for this particular student, and as you see, once you fill out one part of it and you're complete, it puts a green check mark so that you know that's done. So the other thing that's new this year, which is really, I think, going to be helpful, is they have the view, you have a tutorial. So if you're having any questions about that, it's anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes long on each individual section if you have a question. So that seems to be helpful. Certainly utilize that if you need to. So once you fill out, the reason I filled out the education piece here is because you cannot ask the teachers or Ms. Romeo and myself for letters of recommendation until the education piece is filled out. So if you are a student that's going to apply early action through the Common App, I would like you to do this by Saturday. What do you think? By the end of the week. Because then by yesterday. So then we'll get an email. We will then see the deadline that you are applying, so we prioritize that, so we make sure we meet the deadline for your student, and Ms. Romeo and myself can see the colleges you're applying to. Your teachers cannot. The only thing the teachers can see are the deadlines. Ms. Romeo and I can't even see your application, so don't worry about us seeing that if that's not something you particularly want us to see at the moment. We will see the deadlines and the colleges, so that's important. So then, just let's go to the college search. So then you're going to want to add your colleges to the list, and under here you just simply search whatever college it is that you want to add. So let's just, what do you want to add? I don't know, whatever. Okay. So you just simply check off the box and you add the college. And that will put the college on your list. And then just go to and then you go to the My Colleges tab, and right there you'll see that the college is added to the list. Under that, the next step I want you guys to do this week is under Recommenders and FERPA. To go in there, you're going to waive your right to your letters of recommendation. That's what the colleges like to see. You have faith in the people that you've asked to write your letters, so you waive your rights, and then you select who your recommenders are. You invite them. So you would invite myself or Ms. Romeo, depending on who your counselor is. You would invite your teacher after you have actually asked them in person. We don't want you to send them this, because I'll get an email right away, like within a minute. I'll get an email saying you invited me. We want to have that conversation with your teacher first before they get an email saying you've been asked to write a letter. But if you could do this kind of this week, it would really be helpful. I would say I probably have maybe 10 students who have put me on their recommender list, so I would like to see all of them. Especially if you're doing early action. If you're not going to do early action and you're doing regular decision, that's down the road a little bit, that's okay. But early action students, we would like to have this done sooner as opposed to later. So that's kind of just the quick overview of the Common App. Certainly, once again, we're always available for questions as your students are filling it out.
The other thing that's really cool about the Common App is a student will add their teachers, but with every college, they can individually select any number, one or all of their teachers for each school. So we might have students that add one teacher who happen to attend a particular college, and they will only use that teacher's letter for that college. So that gives you this flexibility. You can invite 3 teachers, but use various teachers depending on the subject, the school, for each college. So it's actually really a nice feature.
In the Common App tab again, so this part of the application that your student's going to fill out, they only fill out once. This goes to all of the colleges. So it can tend to be daunting as the students are going through it. Just let them know they only do it once. They can apply to as many schools on the Common App as they want, but they only need to fill this section out once.
Probably the last thing I would add is under writing, this is where their essay goes. At the very, very end of this, the last thing on the whole application is called additional information. That's a space that is, I think you have about 650 words. You can add anything you want to this space. And we use that often for information that did not fit anywhere else. So while you can add 10 activities, many students have way more than 10, or want to offer more details, then that will fit. And this is a place that we very often will add additional information, additional awards, additional activities. So keep that in mind when you're filling out, hopefully if you're sitting down with your child looking at their application and you feel like there's not enough space. Because each activity, I think you get 150 characters, which is really, really little. So food for thought. All right, questions? Anybody in the comment? All right.
All right, so I think I've mentioned some of this already. So the colleges and the teachers cannot see your application or your list of schools. The colleges, of course, once you do the submit button, but the teachers cannot see that. If you are emailed from a college about your application, that's because in the very beginning when you created your account, there's a checkbox that says you agree to getting emails from the colleges you select. So if all of a sudden you put those on your list and you're getting emails, that would be why. Another question that we get asked often is, although we use Naviance within our school, we are not considered a Naviance school because we do not use their eDocs part of Naviance, so we do not send transcripts through Naviance. That comes into play a lot with non-Common App schools as well. They ask if your school is a Naviance school. The answer is no to that. So sending your scores. So Lennox does not have your official SAT and ACT scores. They have to come from the College Board or ACT. So you have to send those, if your school is not SAT or ACT optional, you have to send those directly from those sites. The addresses are up there, the website is up there. There's a cost, I think, I don't know, $12, $13 per school to send those. And so the next couple of slides are just for your information. Not going to go over the details of deadlines and testing dates, but they are right around the corner for those of you still testing. October 7th, which is what, three days away, that's the deadline for the November 5th SAT. So if you are planning on taking it, I would sign up now because they hit you with a pretty good size fee if you're late. And then the next slide is the ACT registration dates and then the dates of the test. This list, fairtest.org, this website lists over 800 colleges that are SAT optional. If you are not the best test taker in the world, you can look on this website. It lists the schools alphabetically. It lists them, you can sort them by state, and it's SAT optional for those students who are good students, but their scores may not fit if you're trying to, if you don't fit within that 50th percentile.
One of the comments I got recently was about if the school is optional, if they're score optional, and you do not submit, are you then perceived as, well, you must have low scores, or perceived as less competitive because you did not submit your scores? And I can tell you, we've asked countless times, schools will talk about it, they genuinely will tell you, and I actually firmly believe it at this point, that if you do not submit your scores, it does not hurt you if they're making it optional. Over and over again, they say we will not consider it and it will not hurt your chances of acceptance. So I tend to believe that fully.
They say it over and over. Yep.
What about the schools that say send your ACT or your SAT? How do you, or they'll take both? How do you make that determination?
So you would look at at that 50th percentile and look at the SAT scores of your child and the ACT scores and which one is closest. You know, if one of them fits within that 50th percentile or is above, that's the one you want to send. Certainly for the test optional schools, if your child has high scores, higher than their average, send them in. Oftentimes what's associated with that, what's important to know is if it's SAT optional and your student scores higher than their average, sometimes merit scholarships are based on SAT scores come into play. So you want to send those if your scores are the average or higher. Yeah.
And we're happy to call. We've done that very often. We'll call admissions and be like, these are the scores. What do we do? Do we send them? Do we not? If we're like unsure. And they're usually incredibly helpful. The other thing just to know is any school except ACT or SAT. So that's across the board pretty much everywhere.
So then the decisions that will be coming in anywhere from, depending on when you apply, December-ish. If it's regular, it's going to be closer to March. 4 different categories. Student will either be accepted, deferred, which means there's still a chance that the student will get in. That's for students who apply early action. They will be deferred into the regular action or regular decision pool. So maybe they didn't meet the criteria for early action. They'll be looked at again with the regular decision applicants. Work with us if your student is deferred. We have kind of a list of things you should do if you get deferred. contacting the school, letting them know anything you've done, new, better, leadership, grades, anything that you've done. But we'll work individually with you on how to reach out to the colleges if you're on that deferred list. Denied clearly is you just put it behind you and you move on. The wait list sometimes can be tricky because if you're on the wait list, it means that you will be looked at again after May 1st, after their class has been determined. So after the deposits have been in, they know how many seats have been filled, then they're like, oh, we have a handful of seats still available. Then they will go to the wait list. So you may not hear from a wait list until it can go all the way up until the middle of August. What the risk is there is financial aid oftentimes has already been determined and used up. So sometimes the financial aid isn't as good during that time. Also, if you're on the wait list, once again, you don't hear till after May 1st. So, pick a school that's on your list that you really are happy with, put the deposit down, and, and then make that decision. Wait list is kind of, it can be stressful for families because if the student still really wants that school and they haven't bought in fully to the other school that they put the deposit on. So that one's tricky too. You do the same sort of thing as far as reaching out to the college to let them know that you're still really interested. It's your top school or one of your top couple schools, that sort of thing.
So all of this is well and good, getting in, doing all the work, but if the bottom line doesn't work for your family, it's all obviously not going to happen. So what we wanted to do tonight, a little more than we have in the past, is just go over how to get even an idea about what a school costs and maybe what that's going to look like for your family. There is definitely, you really just don't ever really know. We've had students do all the things they're supposed to do, they get their package, it's not what they thought it was or thought it would be. So here's just two ways for you to kind of narrow down or at least get a general sense of what a school might cost as you're creating a list. So there's two ways, I think, to really start to guess sort of or estimate the cost of a college. It's very easy to look at the price tag that they have listed, their cost of attendance, choke, close the site down and look somewhere else. However, it's not actually the best way to go about doing this. I actually just went online today and looked at, so can anyone guess the cost of one of the most expensive schools in the country right now? Like what?
80 grand.
Not far off. Over $70,000 was one of the highest priced schools. NYU, believe it or not. A close second, however, is Williams College up in Williamstown. So it's daunting, those numbers are scary. However, on the flip side, you can go to BCC for $4,000 or $5,000. You can go to UMass Boston for $16,000, $17,000. What's interesting though is what we found is sometimes those private schools, the Williams or the NYU, could actually be less expensive than UMass Boston, UMass Amherst, because of the packages that are attached to them. Guessing what those packages are going to be is a really hard thing to do, but we do have some general ways to get at least an idea. So the first thing that we often will do, where is so sort of, I'm going to go with an expensive school to kind of show you how this works. So if we do Syracuse. So I'm on College Board, and literally they have these lovely tabs, which we use College Board primarily as our sort of everyday source for admissions, criteria, majors, campus life, and definitely paying. So I pick my college, I go to the paying tab. So I look at, first of all, in-state or out-of-state. I happen to know it's private, so it doesn't matter, but I would pick out-of-state. We live in Massachusetts, and I look at the on-campus cost. So $63,000, that's quite a lot of money. However, I then go up to the financial aid by numbers, and this is sort of where we really get a good picture. The two big pieces of this, what % of need do they meet? We like numbers that say 96. We love numbers that say 100% of need is met. We go to the little pie graph and we see that 74% of their financial aid is scholarships or grants. So that means you do not have to pay those back. 26% is roughly the loans and the jobs. So when I look at Syracuse, I see, yeah, they're really expensive. They're over $60,000, but 96% of need is met. If I go over here, the average first-year financial aid package is $37,000. So what it tells me very clearly is depending what my need is, what's determined based on the information I put on my FAFSA and the other financial aid forms, the school determines what your need is, and they, in this case, match 96%, roughly. These are estimates, of course, but that's a really nice figure. So personally, I'm aware of students that have received really nice packages from Syracuse. So that's a good example of a school that's pretty expensive. However, you might find that you get a really nice package from those schools. Another sort of surprising kind of thing, let's see. So say I want to look at, I picked SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. Our students apply here every year. If I go to paying, I still pick out of state. So it's roughly $50,000 to go there. Pretty scary. I look at what need they meet, and that's $16,000. That's frightening. The average package, 17. Average need-based loan, 3,000. And if we look over here, they're fine. They give 65% grants or scholarships, but that's only meeting 16% of need. I would like practically cross this like right off my list if the bottom line is important to the school or important to the family. Another one, other schools that are surprising often to us is if you apply to state schools. So a lot of students apply to UNH or University of Vermont. As an out-of-state applicant, it can be really expensive. It can be $40,000+ a year to apply to those out-of-state schools, to a state school when you're out of state. On the flip side of that, there are some, and we think we have handouts about agreements in New England or New York that actually gives a discount for
tuition break.
Yep, the tuition break. So those are really nice too. I think, what do we say? Connecticut, I think, is giving all in-state right now, in-state rates.
Some of the Connecticut state colleges are saying, if you live in Massachusetts, we want you to come to our school. We don't care what your major is. We're going to give you in-state tuition. I'm sure UConn, UConn's not one of them, but it's one of the, the smaller state schools.
What was that program called?
Tuition break? Yeah, we have handouts here if you wanted one.
So when you go on College Board, you can actually, when you're doing your college cert, indicate what you want is the need met. So I often will search 70% and higher if I'm searching for schools. Yeah.
So say you apply ED to the school, like you're certain to go there. Sometimes it's hard to figure out financially what it's going to cost. So is it true that that's the only acceptance that you can't attend the school fee? Like if you find out that they're not going to be enough, you know that.
Right. So you actually, when you get your decision, your ED, you apply early decision, you're notified generally in December for the regular ED, you do get a package on the spot. In 6 years, we've had one student not accept their package. For whatever reason, the numbers generally work. I don't know the rhyme or reason behind that, but they do. And that is the only way to get out of an early decision contract, is if the finances don't. And this one instance, the family appealed it. They did get a better package, and then they still determined it was not going to work for their family. The other thing, the other really good way to get an estimate, if we go then to a college webpage, so if I go to Syracuse, every college is required to provide a net price calculator, it's called. So if you go to their webpage, go to their financial aid page, and you will find somewhere on there a net price calculator. The net price calculator determines an estimate for you of what you will pay to go to that college. Again, the number you get from there is only as good as the numbers you put in. Sometimes they'll let you use your taxes. They'll actually say, enter these line items, and those numbers are probably far more accurate than if you're kind of generally entering numbers. I can tell you personally, I used this and the numbers were fairly close. So if you did a net price calculator at all the schools your child's looking at, and you looked at sort of that common College Board site to kind of get a sense of how much need they meet, you should get a somewhat estimate, sort of range of what you might be looking at. Sometimes there's going to be merit scholarships that you won't be factored in. Sometimes there's scholarships within majors and programs that won't be factored in. So it's still very much unknown. However, it will get you in the ballpark. I would say my experience personally was I was within 5,000, I think, of most of those packages. So that's like a fairly good. So you know if the numbers come up crazy, maybe it's either a phone call maybe to financial aid at that school or admissions to see, in fact, if that looks accurate. And maybe you forget about that school or not, or just roll the dice and see what you get. Yeah.
If you do like early action, does that impact like how they dole out their money? Are those people more apt to get more financial aid?
No, it's based on, the important thing here is meeting their financial aid deadline. So once again, it's different for every college. So you may find that some colleges' deadlines, financial aid, is February 1st, others are March 1st. Some programs are December 1st, some schools. So once again, if your student has their list, go ahead onto the website and find out when their financial aid deadline is. That's what determines the money. Yep.
And we have a handout that actually just, what I just talked about is very...
kind of a step-by-step of what Tara just did.
Step-by-step. Oh, yeah. Let's see, is Al's
Al, we had one. Are you up there? Oh, okay. The second video.
So you want to go to college or career school. Maybe you started saving early. Maybe you'll discover some buried treasure, but more likely you'll need another plan. So if paying for college is going to fall on your shoulders, the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid is the best place to turn for assistance. I bet you didn't know that we're the largest provider of grants, loans, and work-study funds, all of which are easy to apply for. And when it is time to apply for aid, head to your favorite spot to complete the free application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA. Each October, a new FAFSA is available for the next school year, and completing it is free when you go to the official website, fafsa.gov. Your selected colleges will use the information on your FAFSA to figure out how much aid you'll get, so make sure your info is accurate. But if you need to, you can go back and make some changes. If you get a grant or work-study job, congrats, you won't have to pay the money back. However, a federal loan is borrowed money, and you'll need to promise to repay it. Remember to borrow only what you need, because a federal student loan is a real loan. Just like with a car or home loan, it's important that you understand what you're agreeing to. Although college, financial aid, and the prospect of an instant noodle diet can be a little overwhelming, you'll be putting yourself on the path to success when you take the time to plan out your options and let the Office of Federal Student Aid help you along the way. If you have questions or need more information, please visit studentaid.gov.
Okay, we're back. So this year, you've probably heard the FAFSA has changed. So if you've never done the FAFSA before, it's no news to you, I guess. This year, starting this year, you can actually fill out your FAFSA. So that's the form that you have to fill out to get any kind of financial aid or any loans for college. It's required for any college, and sometimes it's the only thing you have to do to apply. In other cases, you have to do an additional form called the CSS profile. The CSS profile just digs deeper. It will look for more information from ex-spouses, from just really more detailed information about your financial status. Some schools will ask for even more than that, and you would have to do a college financial specific aid application. So you could do as many as 3 forms. You may have to send tax returns, and it can be incredibly involved, or it can be really, really simple where you're literally filling out just the FAFSA, which, despite what you may have heard, literally takes about 20 minutes. And it may even take less now because of 2 reasons. One, as of October 1st, you can fill out this application. In the past, you didn't have a tax return typically accessible online, so it would take more time. But what they're doing this year is called, you're actually going to use a year-old tax return, so you're using the 2015 tax return. So everyone has filed them in all likelihood. And what this new FAFSA allows you to do is connect to your tax return, and it automatically dumps that data. So you should, hopefully the process will be quicker, easier, and at the end of this application, you hit submit, you actually get a magic number. And that's the estimated family contribution. Whatever that number is, the college then takes in that number and does what they like with it. So while you might get the number and be like, wow, this is great, it doesn't mean the college is going to use that number to award aid, but they do factor that in. What is sort of the deceiving part of this process is the school determines what your estimated family contribution should be. They determine your need. So you may or may not agree with that. If you don't agree, you can certainly appeal it. You work with financial aid offices. You send more information in many cases. Maybe your circumstances have changed since you filed your taxes, especially this year because we're filing older taxes. Maybe your job has changed, whatever. But it does, the FAFSA does give you a general or a number that then the college starts with. That might be it for some colleges. Others, you will go on to submit a CSS profile. Others, you'll go on to submit financial aid forms specific to that school.
So that's where the percentage comes into play. So if it's a public university and some private universities, if your estimated family contribution by the government is $10,000 and you're going to Syracuse, they'll average 96% of your need. So you'll spend about $10,000 to go there. If you go to SCAD, they're only going to meet 15% of that difference. So you're going to spend upwards of $45,000, $50,000 to go there. So that's how the 2 of them kind of work together.
Question.
Yes.
If you have 2 kids going into school, how does it connect that you've got 2 that are paying for 2 kids, or maybe even 3 kids
So,
at the same time, or like you've got twins going in, and you don't know.
And you have another one next year going in, and
Right,
yeah, I hear you. So there are questions about how many students next year in your family will be in college. How many people in the family? They will ask those specific questions.
They don't know how much you're paying. One could be going to BCC, one could be going to
That's correct.
$70,000 school.
They won't know that. Mhm. So I had, for several years, 2 kids in college at the same time. Never 3, like you will likely have. They will oftentimes ask you for verification. So, for instance, both of the colleges my kids were at, before they gave me a financial aid package, they said they wanted me to verify that they actually were enrolled in college, and then you have to contact that school's financial aid office, and they send the paperwork directly to the college.
You do make out better. I mean,
You make out better when you have more. Yeah. I mean, I do have one in college now. It's not quite as financially good.
Cam and I did the FAFSA Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
and if you have your tax return right in front of you, it will take 15 minutes at the most, depending on how fast you type. It
Yeah.
was super easy, super user-friendly. I was petrified to do it because I thought it was going to take 3 hours. It was easier to do the FAFSA than to sign up for the SATs. So
Yep.
we'll...
and did you use the data retrieval tool?
Yes, yes. You type in that you did, 1040, you put in your social, and it says, would you like to, have us suck that information from the IRS, or do you want to type it all in? No, click, and then bang, it's all there within
Yes.
a nanosecond.
Yep. And that's new as far as being available. I don't know, for those of you who have older students that are already in college, it's new that you can use 2015. You used to have to use this year and do it in January, and your taxes weren't filed yet, and so that is nice. I've done mine as well.
So we did the CSS profile, and I noticed that at the end with the colleges that he was interested, they did give you a list of codes of all the other documentation that you would need.
CSS profile?
No, for his application for the college. Or is that, no, not,
I'm sorry.
when he applies, not just submit the process.
Mhm.
Yeah, so all of this documentation that I need to get, I just mail it directly to the communications office, is that how I get it?
Yeah, that was my experience.
Okay, just when, I just my.
Yeah, and they have these like processing centers where they literally scan it all.
So that's typical,
Mhm.
you know, just receiving random.
Yeah,
pieces of-
packets. I mean, some will ask, you know, for, I mean, my daughter's school asks for everything.
And
Like
you
to
can
send.
send it ahead of when his application is submitted, that's okay?
It's new this year, so it's, hopefully you'll hear, that's the point. We're hoping, we don't know yet, but the idea is you will hear long before you would normally,
Okay.
versus like March or.
So you have a little more time to make, you know, your effort putting into the decision that has to be made to go to college, you have a little more time. I'm hearing kind of two different things from colleges. One is we'll get that package out as soon as we can, as soon as all the other pieces are in place. Other schools are trying to figure it out too, because it's new to them, and they're like, I think we're going to do the same time frame. So.
And the one other thing, for a while we had a trend at Lennox where people were hiring these financial advisors to do their financial aid forms and stuff, and I'm not sure if it benefited anyone because they do attach to your tax returns, so I'm not sure how much like finesse there can be when they're actually dumping the data. So just sort of food for thought. It's kind of waned. I don't think anyone last year had anyone work with them, but that was a trend for a bit. Questions? So the one kind of cool thing going on, or actually it does every year, it's called FAFSA Day. Generally, there's been one offered in Pittsfield, and we haven't heard yet if that's happening this year, but it is on November 6th statewide, and then again in January on the 29th. We're waiting to hear about if there will be a local location. There's a website you can check. But that is generally set up at BCC or the Intermodal Center, and literally you go in with all of your information, you sit down at a computer, and they have an advisor there who actually helps you do your FAFSA. And that's like for folks that are really nervous about the process, a really great idea. I've heard only really good feedback about that whole process and getting the help that day, and you submit the whole thing, done. So that's a really good option if you're nervous about filing.
And especially if you have maybe a complicated situation, family situation, increased medical bills, and whatever the situation may be, if it's not simply, if it's not a simple tax return that gets uploaded, these days are really great and really helpful. Yes?
This kind of goes back, I probably should ask a little bit back. As far as the SAT scores, a lot of kids just took them recently in October. When do those scores come in? If you're looking to apply for early action, how do you make sure that those scores, or can they look at them after your application's been submitted, even though they're not on there and those test scores?
October, typically, yes, they'll look at those scores, but you will want to send those out. I mean, you could go in now and say send scores, I think, or you can wait till they're released if you're concerned about the score.
But I mean, I'm talking about the application, so you put the app and you've already sent them, but will they have it in time when they look at the, I don't know when the actual results are going to come out?
It'll be, yeah, in a couple of weeks, before the end of October. Yeah, so yes, November, if you're thinking November 1st, 15th deadline, once they come out, or even now, just go ahead and say send scores, and they'll take them. The one that's tricky is the November test date with early action. That's when you may have to talk to us or call the college and see if they'll take them.
Sort of the last thing to mention about FAFSA is if you are in a family with, if you're in a divorced family, very often we'll get the question like, who files, how does it work? If you are applying to a state school that only requires the FAFSA, so you're not doing CSS profile, just the FAFSA, it is really up to you on which parent files. If one parent is viewed as a custodial parent, they have the child all the time, they would be the person to typically file. But now it's really common for shared custody, a 50-50 type of arrangement, and that is when either parent can file. And what is a great idea is to get on those calculators, have both parents try it, see who makes out better, and that parent can actually file. There's a little confusion about if that child is on if you're claiming them or not. I've had schools say that, nope, you don't have to claim them. It could be in a divorce agreement or whatever, or some will say, no, you should claim them. So that's a little bit where you might have to look into a little bit more, but generally speaking, either parent can file in those instances. Katie's raising her hand. So here are just the websites for CSS Profile. That, no matter what, if you're in a divorced family, you do have to fill out, both parents will be required to fill out those forms. Colleges do not budge, at least in my experience, they've never budged. If a parent refuses to file, often it's sort of a too bad, so sad scenario. If a child's estranged from a parent, sometimes we as a school, we can vouch that they haven't had communication or they're not, no one knows where they are. There's some like extenuating circumstances we can try and help. It gets very sticky. So ideally, the parents, if both can at least fill out the paperwork, it doesn't mean that you have to pay because you fill out the paperwork. It just means that that's the process. And college is pretty strict. I haven't really seen much flexibility in any way, shape, or form on that. Let's see. Any questions on FAFSA? We will have a FAFSA night, a financial aid night, which will be hopefully in the next 4 weeks or so. We're waiting on dates. Normally it's not till like December, January, but with the new deadline, we're going to try and push that up and have it really soon. And it will be here at Lenox. We switch every year with Lee High School, but it will be here. These are, we don't really get into scholarships much tonight. Generally, our students start really applying after the first of the year. That's when the guidance office has a lot of listings that are fairly local or regional, and our students really do get those scholarships, so I would absolutely have your child put the time in and apply for those. We do have postings for other national or just sort of those bigger scholarships you read about that students can apply for. They are available now. It's a research project. It can take a lot of time, and there are some websites that you can start with. Certainly the more you put into it, hopefully the more you'll get out of it. But at the very least, the Lenox, our guidance site has, usually by January 1st, you'll start to see that list get larger and larger, updated every day, every week. And those are the ones our kids win over and over. So absolutely take some time to look at that. Our Lenox Scholarship, which is the town of Lenox, anyone who lives in the town, a resident, unfortunately, it doesn't apply to choice students, but any Lenox residents, if a student fills out that application and does it correctly, so basically just doesn't do anything wrong, they will be awarded a scholarship. So that is one I would not let go by. That deadline's in April. And we send tons of reminders.
Can I ask you a question about the scholarships? So say your child applies for early decision, gets in, financial aid package, all happy, wrapped up in a happy bundle, so mid-December you kind of like, I'm done. How do you then go about, so then that Lenox form, Lenox, he fills it out, gets a little check mark, he did it okay. Does that scholarship then change anything with our financial aid package, or does that check just get sent to school X, or does that check get made out to Cameron? Like, how does that? I know it's
really tricky.
And each scholarship kind of is handled differently as well. Sometimes the scholarship is, I think in the case of the Lenox Town Scholarship, you have to submit is that the one where you submit your first semester grades?
Mm-hmm.
So.
You get a check.
But you get a check. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if in that instance you're getting the money, you're not getting the money yet. It doesn't matter what the grades are, but you have to show that the student has fulfilled a semester of school. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that necessarily needs to be shared with the college at this point, because you don't know if you're going to get that check. Mm-hmm. Some scholarships send the check directly to the college. We're kind of told from colleges it's different, but they decrease potential loans. That's kind of where they go first. Okay. Ideally, that's where they go first.
They do ask you to report it. You'll see that usually in every form. And then how they treat it can be different with every school. I mean, it's nice when the loan money is, reduced, but I have seen where financial aid packages are reduced too.
I don't know if you instantly, received a scholarship for $1,000, if college X is like, that's my money, because you filed financial aid, not, you're not going to use it to buy books. We're going to use it how we see fit. So it could be either way.
It's true. It is true. Because we've had families be like, why do we do all that work? And then it didn't help us really.
Yeah, it's not cash in the pocket, but in a sense it is.
Yeah. And it's, your discretion. There's no policing out there on this, but they do ask you to report.
And are scholarships just for incoming freshmen, or can you apply for scholarships for the rest of your college?
Yeah, you can. Some are renewable, so you can apply. Even some of the ones that our kids get, you can renew every year. Some have a minimum GPA requirement. Some have, you have to be a full-time student. Those are less common, but they definitely exist. And then it's, I think, a little harder to get scholarships once you're not a freshman. At least I've not heard of many. They're out there, but I haven't heard of many.
Harder to
Trust
find,
me,
for
I've
sure.
looked.
Yeah.
Yes, we have.
All right, so just winding down, we'll wrap it up here, kind of like, okay, what do we do from here? So we've broken it down just to kind of be clear as far as what the students' responsibilities are, what our guidance responsibilities are. So once again, student completes the application, asks for the recommendation letters, sends the scores, supplemental materials. The activities list or resume is something you want to give to Ms. Romeo, myself, and the teachers. As far as guidance, we will send the transcripts, we will send first quarter grades and mid-year grades. We will also send our letter and once again the school report, and we send a school profile that, to each college that talks about our academics and talks about the different disciplines, a little write-up on each discipline that we have here, our scores across the board, that sort of thing. So that goes out as well. Parents typically are the ones who drive the financial aid forms and, of course, provide support and guidance throughout the process.
Lennox doesn't rank also. If you didn't already know that, on the school profile it does state that we do not rank our students. We do a distribution chart, so it just gives schools a sense of kind of where a GPA falls within the class, but we did find that ranking was more detrimental to most students than the rare, the few, so we no longer do that, which is pretty common for small schools.
Is that a public information? Published?
Yeah, it will be on our webpage, so we're actually finishing it right now, so then it will be up on the web if you want to take a look. It's pretty nice. We have a good one. We actually went and had it reviewed and looked at by, I think, 8 schools, so we have a nice profile.
So what the homework for the students now is to get the transcript release forms to us. We'll give you the deadlines for that in a moment. Your activities list is also helpful. The parent questionnaire is very helpful to get your parent's brag sheet on why they think you're so wonderful so that we know a little other side of you. Make an appointment with us. Even if you've done so, we will see you again. If you're so inclined, sometimes your essay is a different insight as well, that we can, if we read that, we may see something else about you that we wouldn't necessarily know. Because we try to write a letter that is all-inclusive and gives a good snapshot of your student and the details or anything that's unique or interesting about them. So these are just the due dates. So if you have an application that's due November 1st, we really like the transcript release forms 2 weeks ahead of time. That gives us time to process everything we said we need to get to the college. Guidance office is kind of crazy busy, to say the least. So we do ask for the 2-week headway. Will we do it a day in advance? Absolutely, we will do it. We just would like a 2-week window. The only time that it's a little bit longer than 2 weeks is around the Thanksgiving and the Christmas, New Year's holiday because of the days off. We are not here in the building Christmas week. We would prefer not to be in here New Year's Eve if you have a January 1st deadline. So these are just some guidelines for you. And I'm going to we don't need to go over the details of the whole senior calendar here. We're wrapping it up. But just to kind of, say broke it down kind of in the months of what we're doing now, September to December. We've gone over all that tonight. January and February, it's kind of like the scholarship thing. In the spring is when you'll receive your admissions decisions, your financial aid packages, and I think we might have mentioned it once tonight, but May 1st is the national tuition deposit deadline, so that's when you have to make your deposit to the college. If you, whatever college you choose, you have to make the deposit by that date. You have to make your decision by that date. So
the one last thing I actually didn't mention about the applications, just before your child, we offer to look through the entire Common App, like line by line with our students, one-on-one. It's a really good idea. It doesn't have to be us. If you as a parent or your family member or someone, it's just important that someone takes a look at their applications before they go out. We always catch little errors, typos. I think the students look at them so often, they start to maybe not necessarily see things that might be wrong. So just ideally, someone should really take a close look, line by line. We do it all day, every day, so we're happy to do that, but before they hit send. And you're welcome to come to any meetings we have with your child at any time. They tend to be tired of us by the end.
Yeah. And there is no spell check in the Common App, so.
Are you calling kids down to meet with them, or is it my son's responsibility to make appointments with you?
We do some chasing, but right now we want that.
Ideally, they reach out to us, otherwise we stand in the hall and we grab them.
Yeah, yeah, it's really helpful if they set up times, because then it just gets a little crazy, so. Questions? Any other questions?
Any other questions?
I think
So
that's
just, yeah.
I think we're good here.
Yeah, we're good. So basically, we're available all the time for you, for your students, make appointments, email us. Any questions, anything we didn't cover that you have questions on? No? All right, that's it. All right, good luck. Good luck.